Hi, a kid from a small town in Andhra Pradesh, where the literacy rate was much lower than that of the country's average. And he belonged to a family where the monthly earnings were less than 10,000 rupees. But he dreamt of a dream, that is to crack IIT JEE. Well, that kid is standing in front of you today to share his journey of how he cracked IIT JEE despite so many obstacles, with a hope that his story would inspire you watching over there. Hi, this is Rajeev YSR, an IIT Madras alumni of 2010 batch. Right now, Chief Operating Officer for Avaan India. I belong to a small place called Shrungarapukota in the district of Vijayanagaram, Andhra Pradesh, where at that time there were only 4 private schools and the rest of the schools were all government schools where the education was not that great. But I was a kid who would generally excel at whatever I did at school, be it education, co-curricular, extracurricular activities. But since my childhood, my parents left no stone unturned in giving us the best education possible. My dad was a small-time government employee with a salary of less than 10,000 rupees a month. He not only had to take care of his own family, but he was also supporting the extended family. This really made it difficult for him to meet the ends, yet they never let the financial crisis influence on our education. And my mother was a homemaker, and myself, my sister, and my mom and dad, we were such a beautiful family, and I was having such a beautiful childhood. Until one evening, when we were watching TV together, and there was a sharp knock on the door. Both my mom and dad were alarmed. They sprang up and they told me to communicate to the person that is knocking the door that the parents were not available at home. I was shocked and surprised because until then my parents have taught me not to lie, to be a good boy. But then I see here my parents asking me to communicate else. I went to the door. I looked at the man. I could recognize him. He was an uncle in the neighborhood. And when he asked for our parents, I said they were not available at home. He left in rage and frustration. But then this question still lingered around in my mind of why should my parents communicate to that man that they were not at home while they were still at home. Well, later I was able to connect the dots and it was very clear. My father took certain loan from that man and he could not repay that in time, and hence they could not face him. Now this incident had its own strong impact on me. Yes, until then the kind of happily ever after bubble that I was living in burst all at once. I could relate the efforts of my parents in ensuring that we have the best education possible. Until then, I was studying because I was enjoying learning. But then, later on, my perception to studies changed. I really wanted something magical to happen, that we come out of that middle class mediocrity and poverty. I was really hoping that there would be some hero from the far distant would come and then deliver us from all. But then I also knew that such heroes only existed in fairy tales and not in real life. And I knew that I had to search for the hero here within. I was thinking, I was battling. I was really battling and I really wanted to come out of this. I never wanted my parents to be in such a situation again. I really wanted to be so successful that money is the least important thing that would ever become to them in their lives. I looked around for a weapon so that I can fight out these middle class mediocrities and the resource crunch. But I could find none. But yes, I found one as a weapon which could really bring us out of those blues. And that was education. My perception to education until that time was to learn. But now, my perception to education was to win, was to chase away these blues, was to give a better, comfortable, dignified, and a life of proud and prideness to my parents. Yes, education was the only tool I had. It was then, during those days, myself and my dad were watching the news together, and there was this news that is streaming where a two-wheeler company was launching the vehicle. So my dad asked me a question. Do you know who designed those bikes? Of course, I said, yes, must be engineers. But then my dad said, no, not ordinary engineers, but engineers who graduate out of IITs. Engineers graduating out of IITs get a chance to design bikes. I was thrilled. That was the first time I was introduced to this word called IIT. Not that my dad knew much about it, but then one of his friends' son cracked IIT and he became the talk of the town then. Probably he wanted to instill that thought into his child's mind, and he was very, very successful. That caught my attention. That was when I first heard of IIT, and I realized and I could understand the difference an engineer would possess passing out of an IIT and a non-IIT. From then on, it was very clear. While I knew that education was the tool that I had to chase away these blues, I also now have a clear goal of where I need to be, or the means through which I can do that. That is IIT. I was in my class 10th and I was studying really, really hard. But then, just to give you a perception, cracking IIT is not only tough academically, but it also demands a lot of financial resources. In Andhra Pradesh, there were many institutes who would train students and coach them to crack IITs, and then they charge not less than 1 lakh rupee per year in those days. It must be much more now. Well, I definitely wanted to crack IIT JEE, and I'm sure that my dad would take a loan again to fund my education, but that was the least thing that I ever wanted, because I wanted to bring my parents out of that situation, and bringing them back into the debt is something the least that I ever wanted. It was during those days that one of those institutions came to our school as part of their promotional activities and told us that if only we cross certain percentage of marks, the entry into those institutions is free of cost. That was like a boom, and that was like one of the sweetest news that I would ever hear at the time. Now I knew for sure what needs to be done. The cutoff that required was 530 marks. And now that was what is in front of me, if only I need to ensure that I get that free seat. Until then, I was studying with the intention that I was competing with only students within my class and school. But that was when I have realized that I am no longer competing with my friends in the school, but with the friends in the whole town. Pause it.